Well, hello, welcome as we continue our chronological read through of the Bible. Today, we're going to return to the narrative of the book of Samuel. Actually, we're going to complete our reading of the book of First Samuel. The Philistines are gathering in their camps, they're preparing to attack Israel. Achish takes David and his men with them. When told that he's expected to come along, David provides, well, kind of a coy answer that Achish interprets as absolute support for himself, though we're never really going to have the opportunity to find out just how David and his men would have responded in battle beside Achish. The next account that we have, chronologically, is out of sequence, but it's easy to see why the writers put it here because it's necessary for us to kind of draw this distinction between David and Saul as this critical battle approaches. Saul sees the Philistine army gathered before him and he becomes very fearful. He tries to inquire of God, but God won't answer him because God has left him just as he said he would. So instead, Saul attempts to go to a necromancer. What he wants to do is he wants to speak with Samuel. Well, it's problematic for a couple of reasons. First, it's patently against God's will. Second, Saul has driven out, or at least driven underground, all of the necromancers, as well he should have. The necromancer in the Canaanite city that he's brought to is really very, very cautious, but finally persuaded to do as he asks. So Saul asks her to bring up Samuel, and for all intents and purposes, it reads as though she does just that. But she herself, you might notice, is quite shocked by what she sees. It would take far too long here to discuss whether or not it's really Samuel that appears to Saul or not. But suffice it to say, for now, that as I mentioned earlier, necromancy is strictly forbidden by God. So it would be very odd indeed for Samuel to participate in any way. And while the answers provided by the Spirit are correct in general terms, they largely just reiterate things that had already been told to Saul by Samuel. And in fact, they're actually wrong in a number of details. Not the least of which is that Saul takes his own life. He's wounded by the Philistines, but the Philistines don't take his life. Saul does. And the second is that one of Saul's son, Ishbosheth, rules for 2 years. So, this really can't be from God because prophecies from God are fulfilled in every detail. Anyway, let's return back to the Philistines' preparations for battle. We find that other Philistines leaders are when they realize that Achish has brought David and his men along, they don't like that at all. They don't trust David and his men. They remind Achish that, hey, this is the guy that killed Goliath. So they tell Achish he's got to send David back. This can't be. It's fine for him to be in his city, in his area, but he's not coming along in this battle. So Achish relents. He sends David and his men home. Well, on arriving home, they find their city Ziklag in flames, and all of their women and children have been carted off by the Amalekites. Well, David's men are furious. They want to stone him. They're so upset. But David inquires of the Lord if they should pursue the raiders, and God tells them to absolutely pursue them, and you will be victorious. So they catch up. By the way, that's one of the differences here. David is the Lord is with David. He's talking with David. He's telling David the things that he needs to know. Anyway, David and his men catch up with the Amalekites. They rescue all of their women and children. None are missing, and actually even none of the spoil is missing. So David, and when they return, David sees to it that all of that spoil is shared among all of the men, including those who had stayed back with the luggage, as it were. And he also sent some of the spoil to the elders of Judah and to his neighbors. Perhaps David senses that Saul's end is near now, and he's beginning to reach out to those that he's going to need to consolidate his power as king. Whatever the case, we see David acting in very king-like ways in this particular account here. Well, the book of Samuel closes with the account of the death of Saul and his sons, well, most of his sons. When the fighting begins, three of Saul's sons are overwhelmed and killed. Saul is wounded but not killed. He asks his armor bearer to kill him because Saul fears being taken alive by the Philistines. He fears that he'll be tortured and so on. But his armor bearer will do no such thing. So Saul falls on his sword and kills himself. The next day, the Philistines discover Saul's body. They cut off his head. They take his armor to their various temples, and his body they take and attach it to a wall, along with the bodies of his 3 sons. But warriors from Jabesh Gilead, from Israel, they go and they retrieve the bodies of Saul and his three sons who have been killed. They return them to Israel, where their bodies are cremated and their bones are then given a proper burial. While David laments and mourns over the deaths of Saul and Jonathan, God has at last delivered David from Saul's hand. In Psalm 18, the last of the things that we'll be reading today, David praises God for delivering him both from Saul and from his other enemies. Maybe you recall reading Psalm 18 yesterday, where in Psalm 17, David was tortured in mind and in soul as he prays to God to pay attention to his cry. Today we read the praise that David heaps on God for answering his prayer and for delivering him. David recalls how bad things were, the fix that he was in, how God in his mighty power delivered him. David describes this with this graphic cosmic language, sharing his wonder, and then he describes it again later on with God in the background, working through the king and his army to accomplish his purpose, not bold and upfront, but fully in charge just the same. Is that often not how things are in our lives as well? Certainly there are times when God is up front and center, but also, and maybe mostly, God seems to be happy working behind the scenes through his people, through those who he has put us in touch with and so on. However he chooses to work, God brings salvation to his own, something for which we honor and we praise him. Well, again, may God be with you and bless you. As always, I pray that you're learning, that you're growing from our time together. I look forward to gathering together again the next time.